Hey everybody, this is Blake here, and welcome to my review of Olympus Has Fallen. Now, I was really looking forward to this one. It looked like it was going to be a balls-to-the-wall actioner, and that's definitely my cup of tea. But at the same time, my expectations were pretty low. For one, Gerard Butler has burned me in the past. If he's not making crappy-ass romantic comedies, although granted, the only one I saw was The Bounty Hunter, but that was enough. He's making desperate to please the critics dramas. And the only one I saw of those was Machine Gun Preacher, which wasn't bad, but it wasn't as good as it thought it was. So I just haven't had very much interest in his films, and I wanted to see him return to the action genre. But even then, his output in that regard has been rather spotty. On one hand, I liked Law-Abiding Citizen, which I thought actually gave him more to do as an actor than Machine Gun Preacher did. But then again, I also really hated Gamer. It's not that I thought Gamer was an awful movie. I just found it to be so unappealing and obnoxious and annoying that I was tempted to actually get up and walk out of the theater. And that's never happened to me before or since then. So yeah, his presence hasn't necessarily added any credibility to Olympus Has Fallen. But the second reason I was wary of it is they were really playing up the throwback angle. And I think making a proper throwback to a past generation of film is just very difficult to do. There is a reason that most of them are parody, like Black Dynamite or Grindhouse. Olympus Has Fallen as being modeled after the action films of the 90s and late 80s that were spawned from Die Hard. And while I obviously love those films, either filmmakers don't really know why those kinds of movies worked in the first place. For example, Season of the Witch was supposed to be a throwback to, the Gothic films of the 60s that starred Vincent Price and were directed by Roger Corman. But if you watch it, even though there's Christopher Lee and has a similar time period, it's nothing like those films. Or they'll go too far with it, like Doomsday. Doomsday was supposed to be an homage to Mad Max and those kinds of films, but they were so heavy-handed with the homages, so reliant on them, that instead of seeing it as a movie, you just see it as a reminder of other better films, and that's always problematic too. And then you'll have films like Lockout or Scream 4 that are so blatant with their homages and throwbacks that they already start to seem dated even when they first come out. Certain styles of acting or dialogue may have worked in the past but don't necessarily work now. So I was worried that Olympus Has Fallen would fall into one of these categories, and shockingly it didn't. I actually really liked it. It's not a great film. It's not going to be remembered as an action classic. It definitely is one of those movies where you do have to sort of turn off your brain. But I thought it was really enjoyable. I think it was cool because even though it is, modeled after Die Hard and the clones that followed that film, it is also its own movie, and they updated those conventions and cliches to where it feels more in place with today's audience. So that made me happy. So where should I start? Well, first off, the premise is pretty absurd. The idea that terrorists can take over the White House is very implausible, and the way it goes down doesn't necessarily add any credibility to that. It is pretty far-fetched, but at the same time, I did like how it wasn't the North Korean government who was doing this. It was just a band of terrorists. I don't know why. It felt less propagandic, I guess. But even though it's a bit hard to swallow, and there are definitely some eyebrow-raising moments throughout the film, I never felt it was totally stupid. In fact, it actually cleverly sidesteps some of the real annoying cliches that come with these kinds of films. For example, the premise is Gerard Butler is Mike Banning. He's a Secret Service agent and in charge of the president's detail. But when an accident occurs that's no fault his own, the First Lady is killed, and he is subsequently removed from the president's detail and is working in the Treasury. Now, most plot descriptions will claim that he's disgraced for that reason, but you never really get that impression. In other movies, yeah, everybody would hate him. They'd look down on him. His coworkers would mock him. But no, everybody seems to think that he did the right thing. In fact, the only person who really seems to hold it against him is himself. He's really guilt-ridden from it. But you see, his coworkers still respect him. His boss still admires him. Even the president, you don't get the impression, hates him. He knows that Gerard Butler did the right thing. He just doesn't want to be reminded of it. So I liked that. And also the kid, the president's son, there are a few times where you just expect the kid to totally hate his dad. Like there's this one part where the dad says, I have a few minutes before I have to go to this thing, so do you want to get some ice cream? He says, yeah. Well, then the Secret Service arrives and they say, we have to go now. And the kid's clearly bummed out. And in another movie, the dad would be like, I'm really sorry. And the kid would just like stomp off or yell at him. Well, the kid actually takes it in stride and actually seemed like a good kid. I like that. That's the kind of stuff I'm glad that Olympus Has Fallen didn't fall victim to. Also, and this could be still a criticism, Gerard Butler's wife, who's played by, I can't think of her name, she's in Silent Hill and Rogue. They have some marriage problems, but they don't linger on that too much. She's never totally bitchy, or they don't. When they have kind of an argument, it's fairly low key. Now the problem is that whole subplot seemed totally pointless. They never do anything with that. But at least, once again, it didn't become too distracting. I'm glad they didn't have, too many scenes where she's just totally angry with him. So yeah, that was a good thing. But of course, this is an action film, so what do we get there? Well, it starts off with a real awesome over-the-top action sequence where, the terrorists take over the White House. There's definitely a little bit too much CGI, but I thought it was okay. I always do have a problem with watching throwbacks and them using a bit too much CGI, but the CGI wasn't that bad, and I think it made up for it with lots of explosions, gun battles, bodies piling up in masses. And I love how after the action sequence you pretty much see dozens of dead people laying through on the White House lawn. That was pretty awesome. But the downside to this is that this action scene is so epic that the movie never is able to top it. This is especially noticeable during the finale where Gerard Butler confronts Rick Yoon, the head terrorist, and their confrontation is sort of lackluster compared to what we got earlier on. But I thought the rest of the movie was very well paced, even though the action becomes fairly normal. It's just some shootouts. Gerard Butler will stab a few people, or they'll get in a hand-to-hand fight with them. I thought those scenes were well executed. In fact, I was really impressed by how well they were shot and edited, and even choreographed. So they were exciting, but at the same time, once again, they just never could match up with that first action sequence. Now, what makes this work is I liked its sense of humor, and I thought Gerard Butler was very entertaining as the main character. Now, once again, I think about Lockout and how they had so many corny one-liners that it became sort of annoying after a certain point. Well, here the one-liners aren't very corny. It's often how he says the line that makes them amusing, and they utilize that, I think, fairly well, to where the entire film becomes sort of lighthearted and just that much more enjoyable. It's because you love to hate the villains. I thought Rick Yoon did a great job. They're so detestable that you want to see Gerard Butler just kick the shit out of them. And watching Gerard Butler, make these amusing lines and kick ass, it's really entertaining to watch. And he's able to utilize his charisma so well. Unlike Gamer, where he's like just really serious. He's trying to do his best Jason Statham impersonation, and I think Jason Statham could do introverted very well. Gerard Butler can't. He needs to be yelling and being awesome, and this film gives him that to do, so I was really happy there. Another thing that I think that kept the pace flowing nicely is they get a big cast for absolutely no reason. You have Morgan Freeman pretty much playing the same role from Sum of All Fears, except not as interesting. And then you have like Angela Bassett, Bassett, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right either. Robert Forster, Cole Hauser, Dylan McDermott, is that his name? just a bunch of other people, Aaron Eckhart, Ashley Judd, a bunch of other people that if you don't recognize by name, you'll at least recognize by face. And, even though I'm sure this was a paycheck for all of them, that's the only reason why they did this, they at least seem to be giving it their all. Morgan Freeman is playing a totally flat, uninteresting character, but he's treating the role, with respect to where, it makes that character interesting. And so that kept the non-action interactions entertaining. So what else can I say? That's pretty much it. It's, like I said, it's not a great movie, but I did think it was a pretty entertaining movie. It's not as good as The Last Stand, but it's definitely better than A Bullet to the Head, and, far better than that last piece of shit, Die Hard. This would have made a better Die Hard sequel than A Good Day to Die Hard. In fact, I probably would have said it would have made a better sequel than Live Free or Die Hard, but not by much. I'd say it's comparable to that movie. One thing I didn't like is I felt Gerard Butler was too invincible. The villains are outmaneuvering everyone, but it seems like they can never really pull one off on Gerard Butler. He's just too awesome and too badass. It's weird how most of the Die Hard clones totally forget that one of the things that made the original Die Hard so great was how vulnerable and human its lead character was. Gerard Butler is pretty much just a flat-out action star. His character is pretty much just an action hero, and that's it. But I still thought it was entertaining. It's nothing it's nothing that the critics are going to especially love. And there's still going to be some people who are going to think it's just too stupid. But yeah, I'd say it's worth a matinee if you like these kinds of action films. But if you don't, I probably wouldn't bother. I would at least wait until it comes out on DVD. So that is that. If you're wondering where Critiquing the Critics is, I got it finished like a week ago, but I'm having difficulty uploading it to YouTube. There's some coding problem or something, but it's all glitchy, so I'm still trying to work on that. I apologize for the delay. I did not do a written review of this, but if you'd like to go to my website, I have written reviews of the newest Universal Soldier movie, the first two Kickboxers, and Maximum Conviction, which is Steven Seagal's newest film that he did with Stone Cold Steve Austin. So check those out, and be sure to follow me on Twitter, and hopefully Critiquing the Critics will be released by Wednesday. We'll just have to see. So I'll see you guys later.